Tanya Monroe stepped out of the sleek black car, her heels clicking against the pavement as she made her way toward the towering glass building that housed one of the most prestigious tech companies in the city. She had prepared for this day, meticulously. Her navy blue blazer was perfectly tailored, her resume polished to perfection, and her confidence unwavering. This wasn't just another job interview. It was a pivotal moment in her career. As the founder and CEO of a highly successful venture capital firm, Tanya had built a reputation for identifying promising businesses and transforming them into industry leaders. Today, however, she was playing a different role: the candidate. The lobby buzzed with energy, filled with young professionals typing furiously on laptops or chatting animatedly over coffee. Tanya approached the front desk, where a cheerful receptionist greeted her warmly. "Ms. Monroe, Mr. Langley will be right with you." The name sent a ripple of curiosity through her mind. Richard Langley, the HR manager whose reputation preceded him. Known for being meticulous and detail-oriented, he was also rumored to have an intimidating presence during interviews. Still, Tanya wasn't fazed. She'd faced tougher challenges before. Minutes later, a tall man with sharp features and an air of authority walked toward her. He extended his hand with a curt nod. "Ms. Monroe," he said, his tone clipped. "Follow me." His demeanor was professional but distant, lacking the warmth she'd expected. They entered a small conference room adorned with motivational posters and stacks of folders. Richard gestured for her to sit, then pulled out a clipboard and began flipping through papers without so much as making eye contact. "So," he started, glancing briefly at her resume. "You're here for the executive director position?" His voice carried a hint of skepticism, as though he doubted her qualifications despite the glowing endorsements listed on the document in front of him. Tanya smiled politely. "Yes, I believe my background aligns well with the requirements of the role." Richard raised an eyebrow. Let's see." He paused dramatically, leaning back in his chair. "Your name, it's unique. Is it common in your culture?" Tanya blinked, caught off guard by the question. It wasn't unusual for people to comment on her name, but there was something about the way he phrased it that felt oddly patronizing. She chose her words carefully. "It's quite common among African American families, yes, but I prefer to think of it as timeless rather than common." He smirked faintly, jotting something down on his notepad. "Timeless, huh? Interesting choice." Before Tanya could respond, he moved on to the next topic. "And tell me, Ms. Monroe, what makes you believe you can fit into our corporate culture? From what I understand, you've spent most of your career running your own company. That's a very different environment from working within an established structure like ours." Tanya leaned forward slightly, her expression calm but resolute. "I appreciate the distinction, Mr. Langley. However, my experience leading diverse teams and driving innovation has equipped me with skills that are transferable across industries. In fact, I see significant potential for growth within your organization if we embrace new perspectives and ideas." Richard tilted his head, studying her as though trying to decipher a puzzle. "New perspectives, you say? Well, that's certainly bold. But let's talk practicalities. Your attire, for instance, it's impressive, don't get me wrong, but do you think it sends the right message? You know how these things work. First impressions matter." Tanya felt a flicker of irritation, but kept her composure. "I assure you my appearance reflects professionalism and respect for this opportunity. If anything, it underscores my commitment to excellence." Richard muttered, scribbling more notes. "Commitment to excellence. Got it." There was a pause, heavy with unspoken judgment. Then, almost casually, he added, "You know, some might argue that stepping into such a high-profile role requires more than just ambition. It demands a certain relatability, something that resonates with the majority of our workforce." The implication hung in the air like a storm cloud. Tanya's jaw tightened ever so slightly, though her smile remained intact. Relatability is important, but diversity of thought is equally critical. A leader should inspire trust and collaboration, Regardless of superficial differences, Richard gave a non-committal shrug. Perhaps, though statistically speaking, candidates who align closely with existing cultural norms tend to integrate more smoothly. Just food for thought. By now, the interview had shifted from a standard assessment to something far more unsettling. Every question seemed designed not to evaluate her capabilities but to chip away at her confidence. Yet, Tanya refused to let him rattle her. Instead, she focused on maintaining her poise, answering each query with clarity and conviction. As the meeting drew to a close, Richard stood up, offering a perfunctory handshake. "Thank you for your time, Ms. Monroe. We'll be in touch." His tone suggested otherwise, but Tanya simply nodded graciously. "Thank you, Mr. Langley. I look forward to hearing from you." Once outside, Tanya exhaled deeply, the weight of the encounter settling over her shoulders. She hadn't anticipated such blatant condescension, but she reminded herself why she was here. This wasn't just about landing a job, it was about understanding the inner workings of a company she intended to acquire. Little did Richard know, his dismissive attitude would soon come back to haunt him in ways he couldn't imagine. For now, Tanya climbed back into her car, ready to channel her frustration into action. Tanya sat in the plush leather chair of her corner office, staring out at the sprawling city skyline. The interview with Richard Langley replayed in her mind like a broken record, each condescending remark echoing louder than the last. She had faced discrimination before, subtle jabs about her hair, comments questioning her competence, assumptions that she didn't belong in spaces dominated by others who looked nothing like her. But this time felt different. This wasn't just an insult to her personally. It was emblematic of something much bigger, something systemic. Her legal advisor, Marcus, knocked gently on the doorframe before stepping inside. He carried a stack of documents and a steaming cup of coffee, which he placed on her desk. "You? Okay," he asked, his tone soft but probing. Tanya hesitated for a moment, then sighed. "Not really," she admitted. "That interview, it wasn't just difficult, it was humiliating." Marcus pulled up a chair, his expression shifting from concern to curiosity. "What happened?" Tanya recounted the details, the thinly veiled skepticism, the unnecessary focus on her appearance, the insinuations that she wouldn't fit into their so-called corporate culture. As she spoke, Marcus's brow furrowed deeper with each sentence. When she finished, there was a long silence. Finally, Marcus broke it. "This isn't just about you, Tanya. If he treated you this way after seeing your resume and knowing your reputation, he's probably treating other people far worse." His words struck a chord. Tanya leaned back in her chair, letting them sink in. She had always been aware of the biases embedded in corporate structures, but this experience hit too close to home to ignore. "Let's dig deeper," she said, suddenly sitting upright. "I want to know everything about that company, their hiring practices, employee turnover rates, diversity metrics, whatever we can find." Marcus nodded, already pulling out his laptop. "Consider it done. But why the sudden interest? You weren't planning to join them, were you?" Tanya gave him a wry smile. "No, I wasn't planning to work for them. I'm still going through with the acquisition. But if what I experienced today is any indication, there's more going on behind the scenes than meets the eye. And if that's true..." She trailed off, her gaze sharpening. "Then they're not just buying themselves a new owner. They're buying themselves a reckoning." Over the next few weeks, Tanya and her team dove headfirst into researching the tech firm. What started as casual inquiries quickly escalated into a full-blown investigation. They pored over public records, scoured social media posts from current and former employees, and even conducted discreet interviews with individuals willing to share their stories. The picture that emerged was damning. The company prided itself on innovation and cutting-edge technology, yet its workforce remained overwhelmingly homogeneous. Women and minorities were grossly underrepresented, especially in leadership roles. Employees described a toxic environment where microaggressions were commonplace. Promotions were handed out based on favoritism rather than merit, and complaints about discrimination were routinely dismissed or ignored. One former employee recounted being passed over for a promotion despite stellar performance reviews, only to watch a less qualified white colleague ascend to the same position within months. Another spoke of enduring racist jokes during team meetings, while management turned a blind eye. But perhaps the most shocking revelation came when Tanya's team uncovered internal emails exchanged between HR staff, including Richard Langley. In one particularly damning thread, Richard openly mocked applicants from historically black colleges and universities, HBCUs, suggesting they lacked the polish required for the company's image. Another email chain revealed discussions about how to justify rejecting candidates based on subjective criteria, like cultural fit, a phrase often used as code for exclusionary hiring practices. As the evidence mounted, Tanya felt a mix of anger and determination bubbling inside her. Anger at the injustice endured by countless individuals who deserved better. Determination to hold the company accountable, not just for her sake, but for everyone who had suffered in silence. Yet she knew this wouldn't be easy. Taking on a major corporation meant facing powerful opponents with deep pockets and high-priced lawyers. Still, Tanya couldn't shake the feeling that this was her moment to make a difference. One evening, as she reviewed the findings with Marcus, she voiced her thoughts aloud. If we file a lawsuit, it won't just be about me. It'll be about every person who's ever walked into that building and felt invisible because of who they are. We have enough evidence to prove systemic discrimination, but it has to be more than that. It has to send a message. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. A class action lawsuit could do exactly that. If we frame it right, it won't just impact this company, it could set a precedent for others. But you need to be prepared for the backlash. Once this goes public, all eyes will be on you. Tanya met his gaze steadily. Let them look. If my story inspires even one person to speak up, then it'll be worth it. With that, she made her decision. The wheels of justice would begin turning, and nothing, not Richard Langley, not the company's board of directors, not anyone, would stop her from exposing the truth. In the days that followed, Tanya assembled a team of top-tier attorneys specializing in employment law and civil rights. Together, they drafted a comprehensive complaint outlining decades of discriminatory practices at the tech firm. The lawsuit sought $1.7 billion in damages, a figure calculated to reflect not only financial losses incurred by victims, but also the broader societal harm caused by systemic inequality. Before filing the paperwork, Tanya took a moment to reflect. She thought about the young women and men who dreamed of careers in tech, but were told explicitly or implicitly that they didn't belong. She thought about the countless hours she herself had spent proving her worth in rooms where she was underestimated simply because of her skin color. And she thought about the future, a future where no one would have to endure what she and so many others had gone through. With a deep breath, Tanya signed the document, sealing her commitment to fight for change. Little did she know, this decision would ignite a firestorm of attention, transforming her from a private investor into a public advocate for equality. But as she put down the pen, she felt a sense of purpose stronger than ever before. The battle ahead would be tough, but Tanya Monroe was ready. The lawsuit hit the news cycle like a thunderclap. Headlines blared across every major media outlet. $1.7 billion lawsuit shakes tech giant over discrimination claims. CEO turned plaintiff files landmark case against corporate giant. And inside the scandal that could change workplace equality forever. The story spread like wildfire, igniting conversations in boardrooms, coffee shops, and social media feeds around the world. For Tanya Monroe, the woman at the center of it all, life changed overnight. Richard Langley, the HR manager whose dismissive attitude had sparked the entire chain of events, found himself thrust into the spotlight, and not in a way he'd ever imagined. At first, he tried to brush it off as a misunderstanding. "It's just one person's word against mine," he muttered to his colleagues during a hastily called meeting. But as details of the lawsuit trickled out, his confidence began to waver. Internal emails surfaced exposing his derogatory remarks about minority applicants. Former employees came forward with their own stories of mistreatment under his watch. Suddenly, Richard wasn't just a minor figure in the case. He was its poster child for corporate negligence. The tech firm scrambled to contain the fallout. Executives issued carefully word-crafted statements pledging commitment to diversity and inclusion, but the public wasn't buying it. Social media erupted with memes mocking the company's hollow promises. Hashtags like Justice for Tanya and Dar corporate culture exposed trended globally, amplifying the voices of those who had long felt silenced. Employees, both current and former, began sharing their experiences online, painting a damning portrait of an organization riddled with bias and hostility. Meanwhile, Tanya became an unexpected symbol of resilience. Media outlets clamored for interviews, eager to hear directly from the woman taking on one of the biggest names in tech. She agreed to a sit-down with a prominent journalist, knowing it was an opportunity to frame the narrative. Sitting in a sleek studio dressed in her signature navy blue blazer, Tanya spoke with quiet determination. "This isn't about revenge," she said, her voice steady. "It's about accountability. No one should have to endure what so many of us have endured simply because of who we are. If my story can shine a light on these issues, then I'm willing to stand here and tell it." Her words resonated deeply. Viewers flooded social media with messages of support, calling her courageous and inspiring. Women and minorities in particular saw themselves in her struggle, rallying behind her. Grassroots movements sprang up, organizing protests outside the tech firm's headquarters and demanding sweeping reforms. Even celebrities and industry leaders weighed in, using their platforms to amplify the message. The lawsuit wasn't just a legal battle anymore. It had become a cultural moment. But while the public rallied around Tanya, the pressure mounted behind closed doors. Her days were consumed by meetings with lawyers, strategizing sessions, and endless phone calls. The weight of representing thousands of victims bore down on her, and there were moments when doubt crept in. Late one night, as she sat alone in her office surrounded by stacks of documents, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of what she was undertaking. Tears welled in her eyes, not out of fear but out of exhaustion. This fight wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. Marcus noticed the toll it was taking on her. "You don't have to carry this alone, Tanya," he reminded her, gently during one of their late-night strategy sessions. "We're all here for you." She nodded, appreciating his concern, but deep down, she knew this was a burden she had to shoulder. Every setback, every insult hurled by the defense team, only fueled her resolve. She thought about her mother, who had worked tirelessly as a nurse while raising 3 children, often enduring racism in silence. She thought about her younger self, fresh out of college, fighting to prove she belonged in rooms where no one looked like her, and she thought about the countless others who never got the chance to fight back. As the weeks turned into months, the legal proceedings intensified. Depositions were scheduled, evidence was presented, and motions flew back and forth between the two sides. The defense team launched a counter-offensive, accusing Tanya of exaggerating her claims and exploiting the situation for publicity. They argued that her lawsuit was politically motivated, designed to capitalize on growing societal tensions over race and gender equality, but Tanya remained unfazed. She knew the truth would prevail, and she trusted her legal team to dismantle the opposition's arguments piece by piece. One pivotal moment came when a former employee named Jasmine Patel took the stand during a pre-trial hearing. Jasmine recounted years of being overlooked for promotions despite consistently outperforming her peers. She described how male colleagues openly mocked her accent and questioned her ability to lead projects. Her testimony brought tears to the eyes of many in the courtroom, including Tanya. It was a stark reminder of why this fight mattered, not just for her, but for everyone who had been dismissed, demeaned, or denied opportunities because of prejudice. Outside the courtroom, the momentum continued to build. Lawmakers cited the case as evidence of the need for stronger anti-discrimination laws. Advocacy groups organized workshops and seminars to educate companies on fostering inclusive environments. Even competitors in the tech industry began reevaluating their own practices, fearful of facing similar scrutiny. The ripple effects of Tanya's actions extended far beyond the confines of the lawsuit itself. For Richard Langley, the unraveling was swift and merciless. His attempts to deflect blame fell flat as more incriminating evidence came to light. Colleagues distanced themselves from him, unwilling to be tainted by association. He resigned quietly, slipping away without fanfare, but the damage to his reputation was irreversible. In interviews, former co-workers described him as arrogant and out of touch, someone who thrived on maintaining the status quo rather than challenging it. Through it all, Tanya remained focused on the bigger picture. This wasn't about punishing individuals. It was about dismantling systems that perpetuated inequality. As she prepared for the next phase of the trial, she reflected on how far they had come and how much further they still had to go. The road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but Tanya was undeterred. She had started this journey to seek justice, and she wouldn't stop until she achieved it. And so, with unwavering determination, Tanya stepped into the next chapter of the fight, ready to face whatever came her way. The courtroom was packed to the brim on the day the trial began. Reporters jostled for seats in the front row, their cameras clicking incessantly as Tanya Monroe walked in, flanked by her legal team. The air buzzed with anticipation, a mix of excitement and tension that seemed to press down on everyone present. This wasn't just another court case. It was a moment that could redefine workplace equality for generations to come. Tanya sat at the plaintiff's table, her posture calm, but commanding. She wore a tailored burgundy suit, a color she had chosen deliberately. It symbolized strength and resilience. Her expression gave nothing away, though inside, her heart raced. Years of preparation had led to this moment, and now the stakes were higher than ever. Across the aisle, the defense team huddled around their clients, whispering urgently. They looked nervous, glancing occasionally at the growing crowd outside the courthouse, chanting slogans like, "Equal rights now." The judge entered, calling the room to order. After preliminary motions were addressed, the prosecution called its first witness, Jasmine Patel, the former employee whose testimony during the pretrial hearing had struck such a powerful chord. As Jasmine took the stand, the atmosphere shifted. Her voice trembled slightly at first, but as she recounted her experiences, being passed over for promotions, enduring racist remarks from co-workers, and feeling powerless to speak up, the words flowed steadily, each one landing with weight. Richard Langley, sitting quietly among the defendants, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. When Jasmine mentioned his name, describing how he had dismissed her concerns about workplace harassment, his face flushed red. The defense attorney tried to discredit her, suggesting she was exaggerating or fabricating details. But Jasmine held firm. "I'm not here for revenge," she said firmly. "I'm here because no one should have to go through what I did." Next, the prosecution introduced internal emails obtained from the company's servers. These documents revealed a pattern of discriminatory behavior, not just isolated incidents but a culture of exclusion embedded within the organization. One email chain showed Richard mocking applicants from historically black colleges and universities, HBCUs, referring to them as unpolished. Another discussed strategies to avoid hiring candidates who didn't fit the mold, a phrase often used to exclude women and minorities. The emails painted a damning picture, leaving little room for denial. When Richard himself was called to testify, the mood in the courtroom grew tense. Under cross-examination, his earlier arrogance crumbled into defensiveness. The prosecution lawyer methodically dismantled his arguments, forcing him to confront the evidence against him. "You sent this email, correct?" the lawyer asked, holding up a document. Richard squirmed, stammering something about context, being misunderstood. But the more he spoke, the more his credibility eroded. By the time he stepped down from the stand, he looked defeated, his once confident demeanor replaced by shame. Throughout the trial, Tanya remained composed, listening intently to every word. Yet the emotional toll was undeniable. During breaks, she retreated to a private room with Marcus and her legal team, where she allowed herself brief moments of vulnerability. "It's hard hearing all of this again," she admitted during one such pause. "But we're doing the right thing. We have to keep going." Her resolve inspired those around her, reinforcing their commitment to seeing the case through. As the days turned into weeks, the prosecution presented a parade of witnesses, former employees, diversity consultants, and even industry experts, who testified about the broader implications of systemic discrimination. Each story added another layer to the narrative, painting a vivid portrait of an organization that had failed its most vulnerable members. Meanwhile, the defense struggled to mount a coherent counter-argument. Their attempts to portray the lawsuit as politically motivated fell flat, especially when confronted with overwhelming evidence of wrongdoing. One of the most powerful moments came when Tanya herself took the stand. Dressed impeccably and exuding quiet confidence, she recounted her experience during the fateful interview with Richard. Her voice wavered only once, when she described how his comments made her feel invisible, as if her accomplishments counted for nothing. "I've worked my entire life to get where I am today," she said, looking directly at the jury. "And yet in that room, none of that mattered. All he saw was my skin color, my name, my appearance. That's not just unfair. It's wrong." Her closing statement brought the courtroom to silence. "This case is about more than me," she declared, her voice ringing clear. "It's about every person who has ever been told they don't belong. It's about every child who dreams of working in tech or any field and wonders if they'll face the same barriers I did. If we want to build a better future, we need to hold companies accountable for their actions. We need to demand change, not tomorrow, not next year, but today." By the time she finished speaking, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even some members of the opposing counsel appeared moved, though they quickly masked their emotions. Outside the courthouse, crowds erupted in applause as snippets of her speech were broadcast live. Social media lit up with praise, with hashtags like "Thasors Thank You Tanya" trending worldwide. For many, her words encapsulated everything the movement stood for: justice, equality, and hope. But while the public rallied behind her, Tanya knew the real battle would be decided by the jury. Closing arguments concluded, and the judge instructed the jurors to deliberate carefully. As they filed out of the courtroom, Tanya felt a surge of anxiety. After months of preparation, the outcome rested in their hands. Would they see the truth? Would they understand the gravity of what was at stake? For 2 agonizing days, the world waited. Reporters camped outside the courthouse, speculating endlessly about the verdict. Supporters gathered nearby, holding signs and candles, praying for justice. Inside, Tanya and her team stayed close, reviewing notes and preparing for every possible scenario. Sleep eluded her, but she refused to show weakness. "Whatever happens," she told Marcus, "we've already won in a way. People are talking, change is coming." Finally, on the 3rd day, the jury returned. The courtroom fell silent as the foreperson stood to deliver the verdict. Tanya clasped her hands tightly, her breath caught in her throat. When the words came, "Guilty on all counts," a wave of relief washed over her. Cheers erupted from the gallery and tears streamed down her face. Justice had been served. Yet Tanya knew this was only the beginning. The fight for equality wouldn't end with a single verdict. As she left the courthouse, surrounded by supporters and flashing cameras, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would still be long, but for the first time in a long time, she believed real change was possible, and she was ready to lead the charge. The verdict echoed through the courtroom like a thunderclap. Guilty on all counts. For a moment there was silence, a collective pause as the weight of the decision settled over everyone present. Then, almost simultaneously, cheers erupted from Tanya's supporters in the gallery. Strangers hugged each other, tears streaming down their faces. Reporters scrambled to capture the historic moment, their cameras flashing like strobe lights. Outside, the crowd waiting anxiously outside the courthouse erupted into applause, chanting Tanya's name and holding signs that read, "Justice prevails and equality for all." Tanya stood at the center of it all, her emotions swirling beneath a calm exterior. She felt relief, vindication, and an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Not just for herself, but for every person who had endured similar injustices without ever seeing justice served. The jury had awarded $1.7 billion in damages, a staggering sum meant to compensate victims and force systemic reform within the company. But more than the money, it was the message that mattered most. No one was above accountability, not even corporate giants. As the courtroom emptied, reporters swarmed around Tanya, shoving microphones in her face and shouting questions. How? Does it feel to win? One asked. What's next for you? Another pressed. Tanya raised a hand, signaling for quiet. When she spoke, her voice was steady, filled with purpose. This isn't my victory. It belongs to everyone who has fought against discrimination in the workplace. Today we prove that change is possible when we stand together. Back at her office later that evening, Tanya allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. Her team had gathered to celebrate, popping champagne bottles and sharing stories of how this case had inspired them personally. Marcus handed her a glass, raising his own in a toast. To justice, he said simply. Tanya smiled, clinking her glass against his. And to the work still ahead, she added. Because while the trial was over, the real challenge, transforming the company and its culture, was only beginning. Rebuilding from within, with the acquisition now finalized, Tanya wasted no time implementing sweeping changes. She assembled a new leadership team made up of diverse voices, including former employees who had been wronged by the old regime. Their first order of business was to overhaul the company's hiring practices. Gone were vague terms like cultural fit. Instead, they introduced standardized criteria designed to eliminate bias. Every candidate would be evaluated based on measurable skills and qualifications, ensuring fairness across the board. Training programs became mandatory for all employees, focusing on topics like unconscious bias, allyship, and creating inclusive environments. These weren't just PowerPoint presentations or check-the-box exercises. They were immersive workshops led by experts in diversity and inclusion. Employees participated in role-playing scenarios, learning firsthand how harmful stereotypes could manifest in everyday interactions. Feedback forms distributed after each session showed overwhelmingly positive responses, with many participants expressing a newfound understanding of their colleagues' experiences. But perhaps the most impactful initiative was the creation of an employee advisory council. Composed of representatives from every level of the organization, the council served as a direct line of communication between staff and leadership. Its members were empowered to raise concerns, propose solutions, and hold executives accountable for progress or lack thereof. At its inaugural meeting, Tanya addressed the group directly. "You are the heart of this company," she told them. "Your voices matter. If we're going to rebuild trust, it starts with listening to you." The changes didn't stop there. Tanya also launched a mentorship program aimed at nurturing underrepresented talent within the company. Young professionals were paired with senior leaders who shared their backgrounds, providing guidance and support as they navigated their careers. For many mentees, it was the first time they'd seen someone who looked like them in a position of power, and that visibility alone was transformative. A movement beyond the company. Outside the walls of the tech firm, Tanya's influence continued to grow. Inspired by the lawsuit, lawmakers across the country began drafting legislation to strengthen anti-discrimination protections in the workplace. Advocacy groups used the case as a rallying cry, organizing conferences and seminars to educate companies on fostering inclusivity. Even competitors in the tech industry took notice, pledging to review their own policies and practices. Tanya became a sought-after speaker, traveling the world to share her story and advocate for systemic change. Whether addressing packed auditoriums or intimate roundtable discussions, her message remained consistent. Equality isn't optional, it's essential. Diversity isn't just a buzzword, she often said. It's a strength. When people from different backgrounds come together, they bring unique perspectives that drive innovation and growth. Companies that fail to embrace that will find themselves left behind. Her efforts extended beyond speeches and panels. Using part of the settlement funds, Tanya established the Monroe Foundation, dedicated to supporting underrepresented professionals in STEM fields. The foundation offered scholarships, grants, and networking opportunities, helping bridge the gap for those who might otherwise struggle to break into the industry. It also partnered with schools and community organizations to introduce young students to careers in technology, planting seeds of possibility in the next generation. Personal growth and legacy. For all her public achievements, Tanya's journey wasn't without personal challenges. The trial had taken a toll on her mental health, forcing her to confront painful memories of past discrimination. There were nights when she lay awake, replaying moments of doubt and questioning whether she'd done enough. But through therapy and self-reflection, she learned to channel those feelings into action. "Healing isn't linear," she once wrote in a journal entry, "but every step forward is worth it." She also found joy in unexpected places. A chance encounter at a charity gala introduced her to Maya, a journalist covering social justice issues. Their conversation sparked a friendship that blossomed into something deeper. For the first time in years, Tanya allowed herself to prioritize love and connection, realizing that vulnerability wasn't weakness, it was courage. Looking back on everything she'd accomplished, Tanya felt a profound sense of fulfillment. She hadn't set out to become a symbol of change. She'd simply wanted to do what was right. Yet in doing so, she had ignited a movement that transcended industries and borders. Her legacy wasn't just about winning a lawsuit or transforming a company. It was about proving that one person's determination could spark monumental progress. Closing reflections. Years later, Tanya stood on stage at a global summit on workplace equality, gazing out at the sea of faces before her. Many attendees were young professionals, eager to make their mark on the world. As she delivered her keynote speech, her words carried the wisdom of experience and the hope of possibility. "Change doesn't happen overnight," she said. "It takes courage, resilience, and an unshakable belief in what's right. But I promise you this: if you refuse to stay silent, if you choose to stand up, even when it's hard, you can move mountains." When the applause subsided, Tanya stepped off the stage, greeted by admirers and allies alike. Among them was Jasmine Patel, the former employee whose testimony had helped secure the landmark verdict. They embraced warmly, sharing a look that needed no words. Together they had turned pain into purpose, injustice into justice, and fear into hope. And though the road ahead would always demand vigilance, they walked it side by side, knowing they had already changed the world.